Hi there, welcome everybody to this week's episode of Storm Champ, where we talk with everyday people about their acts of resistance and resilience as they get through the storms life throws our way. This week we're talking with Carlos, one of our co-founders, a little bit about his background and things going on in his life over the last couple of years that led him to be interested in starting this passion project with us, and some life lessons I'm sure he has to share with all of us too. So Carlos, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate, definitely appreciate being on. I was thinking about it earlier today. I've done like 20, 25 podcasts in my history, and I've never been on this side.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've always been the interviewer, never the interviewee. So it's a definitely kind of a different feeling, but I'm excited and I'm really happy to be here, and I appreciate your time tonight.
Awesome. Well, yeah, of course. Well, let's get into it a little bit. I know you've had a little bit of experience in the podcast world, and there's something about storytelling that really strikes a chord with you. Can you tell me a little bit about why that's such a big passion?
Yeah. So I think when I first started doing this back in, it must have been 2009, 2010 timeframe. It was just me and a buddy. We were really into movies. We were really into pro wrestling. And we're like, hey, we should start a podcast. And that's when podcasts really started to take off, kind of
Yeah.
in that time frame on the internet. And we said, hey, let's come together. Let's throw some shows out there. I think we did like maybe 15, 20 episodes or whatever. Just us shooting the shit and kind of just enjoyed it. And then unfortunately, life got in the way. We got busy and, things didn't really go. Didn't get as big as we had hoped. But the other part too was at the time I was on my fraternity's national board, and I was running kind of the communications piece of the board at the time. They had a position, kind of a new position, and it's changed a lot since then. But anyway, so I was doing communications, and we actually did a podcast for the fraternity where we were interviewing alumni, influential members, headquarters people, that kind of stuff too. So I was doing a lot of the interviews on behalf of the fraternity. And I think we ended up doing like maybe 10 episodes or something like that of different interviews. It's just something I've always been interested in. It always kind of scratched the creative side for me. So I'm excited to be able to take kind of that experience from, about 10 years ago and kind of apply it to what we're doing here at Storm Champ.
Yeah, so there's something timeless about hearing someone's story, right? A little bit of a vulnerability piece and kind of seeing a behind the scenes look maybe at the narrative that folks put out there, especially today. You talked about maybe 10 years ago starting a podcast and just the development and changes in social media, the accessibility to people's information, the entitlement that other people might feel towards knowing about you and your life. It's a
Right.
different world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we weren't doing the video thing back then. It was
Yeah.
all audio. So, when we started doing Storm Champ and we started adding in the video part, it's like, oh, this is cool. You have a very different kind of platform, and people get to kind of see you and see your emotions and see kind of how you're thinking about things. So it's really, really cool to add that part to it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of social media, I know I've seen you get a little bit more active on your pages and things in the recent months. And I think all of us kind of come and go with our feelings around social media. I think that might be a nice topic to kind of start getting a little deeper into some things. The pros and cons, right? It's a double-edged sword. We love it and we hate it, but for good reason. What are some of your thoughts around that as you've kind of come and gone in your own social media presence?
Yeah, so I know for me, I would use social media just kind of pretty much like 99.9% of other people posting pics of my kids and my, every random shot of myself, if I actually got the courage to take a picture of myself. And then when things started to kind of fall apart for me, I disappeared. I just unplugged from social media for about 3 or 4 months. I was just done. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to be on it.
Hmm.
Dealing, I'm sure we're going to talk about that part, but, kind of dealing with my own thing. But as I started to come out of it, I realized that I should be using social media as a platform to help people. And so, which is really different for me because I'm super introverted. I don't put myself out there. I definitely was the guy that was telling other people, yeah, you should put your business out there. No one needs to know your stuff and all that. And all of a sudden, here I am talking about like, you got to own your life. And I was going through this shit. And it's like, who the F is this guy? In fact, I had a friend of mine at work. We were talking about some of the stuff I posted, and she's like, yeah, I thought your account got hacked. I'm like, yeah, I was like, yeah, it's pretty, my life got hacked. That's what happened.
That's
So,
it.
but yeah, for me now, it's social media is a tool to try to impact other people's lives and use it in a way where if we're producing content for Storm Champ or if we're writing a blog post for, my personal blog or whatever, it's a way to advertise and hopefully provide some bit of value in whatever I'm going through that day or however I'm thinking about that day in that moment or that whatever that picture is showing. Can I provide some value for somebody to help them get through like a moment or a minute or an hour or a day of despair, right? And if I can just do that from one person with every post, then my job's done, and that's really kind of what it's about for me now.
That's awesome. And I've noticed a trend just generally, and maybe it's just me kind of growing up and out of my own social circles and finding more quality, still quantity. I think I have something like 1,500 Facebook friends, 1,300 of which I probably have never even interacted with, right? Like there's just,
Right?
it's just
Yeah.
so funny because you're right. It's a platform you get to choose what you want to do with it, and the reach is just so expansive. It's pretty awesome when you think about the opportunity we have there. So I
Absolutely.
know in our short time working with Storm Champ so far, we've been kind of talking about our reach with social media and engaging with other like-minded folks out there. You know, last episode we were speaking with someone who's been using social media pretty predominantly with their project and things like that. And so there is a powerful opportunity there. Is there anything in the social media world that you have latched onto that you think others should maybe check out?
Yeah, so what I'm finding is that I use Facebook very differently than I use Instagram. It's just really different. I feel like a little bit more connected with people on Instagram than I do on
Uh-huh.
Facebook, and maybe it's
Weird.
because there's a lot of, I don't know, maybe noise. I know with some of my posts, I was actually more nervous to post them on Facebook just because there was more friends and like closer family on my Facebook friends, and there was a little not as much on Instagram at the moment, right? So it's kind of like I felt like a little bit more free when I first started posting again. Now I kind of just don't care, like it's just like whatever, because I'm getting to the point where I just don't care about people's trying really hard not to care about people's judgment and opinion. It's just like I'm going to post what I'm going to post, and what whoever is going to see it is meant to see it, or whoever takes value from it is meant to take value from it. But I definitely like Instagram, the platform and kind of the medium there a lot better. And I found we get a better traction even when we do the post for Storm Champ.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting too because I think Instagram was created sort of as a visual piece to it. They're owned by the same company. I'm sure
Right.
you know this,
Yeah.
but I mean, and like everything in the free world is owned by two people, so whatever. But that's a whole different podcast. The situation with exposing yourself or being vulnerable. I know it takes a lot of courage to uh, put your story out there, to even just present yourself. You were speaking about, some hesitation or maybe some self-conscious moments of taking a photo and
Yeah.
allowing folks to see that and wondering what the perception of that action might be from the outside world. How do you balance doing what you want to do and knowing you have a purpose and maybe the audience's perception or misunderstanding of what it is that's going on there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I battle with every time I post something
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, right? So the first thing that I kind of ask myself is this thing going to make me uncomfortable, and why? And I kind of lean into that. And a lot of it goes back to needing the reassurance and validation of others, right? And there's this whole thing where like I'm trying really hard to get to a point where I don't need that from anybody because I'm confident enough and sure enough of myself and what I'm doing that I don't care about those what other people think more than I care about what I think. Now, of course, like there's the 5 or 6 people in this world that I care about their opinion more than anything, but you got to try to get to the point where you value their opinion, you listen to them, but it doesn't supersede your own. It doesn't supersede what you're feeling or what you're thinking. So um, the big thing for me was, again, getting back to just people a lot of folks, especially those close to me, don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I still get a lot of kind of really funny looks sometimes with some of the things that I post. But I just know like I must be doing something right if I'm making people talk about it, or if I'm
Yeah.
making people think about it, or even though they might look at it kind of funny, they're like, oh, it makes sense. It was really good. I love the way it was written. It's just, it goes back to like, it's just not you, Carlos. It's just not who we have known for the last, 40, almost 41 years now, 42 years. Wow. 42 years now that,
Uh-huh.
it's just very different and out of character for me.
Mm.
And then once people realize and they sit down and talk with me, they start to understand like the character I was and who I was portraying to the world isn't the same person anymore.
Right.
And what you see is what you get with me now. There isn't a difference anymore. And I'm working really hard to continue to be the one whole person as opposed to like who the world thought I was supposed to be versus who I was really on the inside.
Yes, so there's a lot of church in that. Absolutely. There's a lot going on in there. And And that's a really difficult transition to get to. It's a commitment that I think we make. If other individuals listening and understand what that's like, I'd love to hear some comments on how you stay courageous and brave in your own truth in that matter. Because I mean, the only thing constant in the world is change. And isn't it the whole point for us to evolve and to be impacted in different ways through life's journeys, hopefully positive ones as well as some negative ones, but sometimes life weighs us down a bit and kind of gets us in the shadows for a little longer than we really anticipate. And things morph and change in that world too. So I know that there's a lot that we could get into and talk about, and whatever your comfortability level is with it, I'm here for you. But maybe you want to talk a little bit about what some of that time off of social media and away from folks was like, and why it was so difficult for you to face the fact that what you were projecting wasn't the truth of who you were.
Yeah. So the time sucked. I mean, to be completely blunt,
Yeah.
and I think as I explain it, I have the luxury of hindsight now, right? And I can kind of categorize certain phases of that storm and that darkness in certain ways, but trust me, I will tell you, in the middle of it, I had no idea what the fuck was going on. Like, I seriously was like, what the hell's happening? So I think so. Um, I actually start with a story. So early in my Air Force career, I was stationed in Oklahoma City, and I used to drive this Nissan Sentra, right? And one day I noticed that the rear view window wasn't defrosting anymore. And so I looked at it, and one of the filaments you could tell had burnt, right? And there was just this really tiny little crack in the window. And of course, it's one of those, I'll take care of it, some other time. And I kind of wasn't paying attention to it. And as time went on, the crack got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And there was one point where I walked out in the morning, and it happened to be it was really cold that day, and the entire back window was shattered.
Oh.
And it's the safety glass though, so it was shattered in place, right? It hadn't fallen down or nothing, but it was the whole thing was just completely shattered from end to end.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the metaphor that I use when I think about there was cracks in me, and there was cracks in things I was doing, decisions I was making, poor decisions I was making, that all of a sudden something happened and my world shattered, right? And so, sometime at the beginning of October of last year, so just, whenever you listen to this would have been 2018, I found myself, there was some really important relationships that were not in the place that I wanted them to be. I had recently switched roles at my job, and things weren't going well there. By this point, I had pushed a bunch of people away because I had this whole thing where I hated humans. And, there was a point where it felt like something just shattered. And I found myself in a really kind of depression. And I didn't know what it was at the time. Like, there would be moments where I was at work and like I couldn't breathe. And like I'd have to go to my car, right? And like hide in my car and like just try to catch my breath because I couldn't breathe. And I'm like, what is this thing, right? Like, and I thought it was anxiety, and I'm like, I got to deal with it. And I've always been this kind of what I felt was a resilient person. I bounce back from stuff pretty easily, always glass half full kind of guy, which we could talk about the whole glass thing, because I have my whole perception of the glass half full or half empty thing has changed. But yeah, and it got to the point where like even I started pushing away my family, like my immediate family, and I would hide in the garage, or I would hide in my room, and like I was like, something is right. I knew something was wrong, something was off, and I just couldn't figure out what it was. And as I started to kind of like get more into the darkness part of it and fall into the depression, I was like, I got to do something different. So when I finally got help, I finally started seeing a therapist, which, first time in my life ever admitting that I was, going to go see a therapist. And I did the question, you always get a questionnaire about your symptoms. And I thought I was anxiety. And I had told her, I was like, I'd like to make an appointment. I think I'm dealing with anxiety. And after I got done with the questionnaire, it made me realize I'm actually dealing with depression. Like, this is depression. This is an anxiety. And the anxiety piece of it was a kind of a side effect of like the deeper problem of like dealing with the depression part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was affecting every single part of my life. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? Like, I don't understand why I'm not shaking this or breaking this out or whatever. So as time went on, I finally started to figure out, like, started looking at different things, started using my time differently, started to tune into, different books and things. And, slowly but surely I started to come out of it. And now, I'm like, it's 8 months later or so, 9 months later. And it was one of those things where the depression never goes away. The darkness never goes away. It will pull you back in a heartbeat. And I'll be really honest, like this week has been pretty challenging for me from an emotional standpoint. And it's like that song, Hello Darkness, My Old Friend, right?
Yes.
It's just like pulls your ass back in.
Yeah.
And so it's a battle that you fight every single day. And I look at it very differently now. I try to, and when I'm interacting with people now, I try to like, if they respond to me in a negative way, or if they're just angry about something, I really try to like empathize with them. It's like, what are they going through in their lives? Because their reaction to me isn't about me. It's
No, it's
about
about
something
them.
deeper that's happening with them. So I try really hard to get there. So that whole thing was the depression. As I was working through that, it actually led to a midlife crisis, which, to be honest, I can't even believe those words came out of my mouth just now, because I've never admitted that to anybody. But I was dealing with like legitimately midlife crisis, like questioning who the fuck I was in this world, what was I doing, where did my dreams go,
Yeah.
what value am I providing, and from the crisis led to like pretty chaos. Because once you go through it, like if you've ever been in a midlife crisis, or folks that have been through a midlife crisis, you get to a point where you get super brutally honest with yourself, and you get super brutally honest with people around you. And that is not a good combination sometimes. Like people don't know how to take you, and you come across as really direct and
Hostile.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you don't mean to do that, but as you're like figuring yourself out, you realize you start setting up. That's where boundaries is a big thing. Like all of a sudden, like for a person like me who didn't establish good boundaries, all of a sudden I was establishing boundaries, very strict boundaries with, various things in my life. And those people involved with those things were like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Right.
Uh,
You can't tell me to do that.
exactly.
What?
Like all of a sudden, like, we've been, it's been like this for X number of years. Why all of a sudden is it a problem? Well, no, that's what you understand. It's always been a problem. The problem was I never spoke up, and
I
never
internalized it. Yeah, I kept it. Yeah, exactly.
And so the crisis, when I dealing with the crisis, finally got to the point where I kind of led to an awakening, and that's where I realized like the person I was projecting to the world isn't the one that I was on the inside. And so there was a lot of work that went into like figuring, I woke up to that and figuring out, okay, how do I merge the two together? And it finally got to the point where I felt like I'm in this rebirth phase now, where I am a different person. I think a lot differently. I see things a lot differently. And the most important thing is I feel like I am so much more tuned in, not only to myself, and then when you tune into yourself, it helps you tune into the broader world. And it's still a work in progress. It's literally decisions you have to make every single day that says, I am going to consciously tune in today so I can be the best version of myself today, for not only myself, but for everyone around me. Right. And it's a battle. It's not like you just make that decision one day and all of a sudden poof, it's just there. It's something you have to you have to do this every single day.
Yes, every hour of every day. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think you speak to a whole lot of our audience will resonate with what you just described, and what was about 8 to 10 months of a journey there. Yeah,
And let's be clear, like the journey continues, right? Like I said, this week has been particularly rough. I mean, I don't know how I'm coming across on camera. Like maybe I'm got it together and composed, but like honestly, if you would have saw me like earlier today, you're like, Dad, this dude's he's a hot mess, right? Like it happens. It's gonna pull you back in. And the big thing is once you tune in and you can start leaning into those emotions and you don't bury them or you don't eat them, it's like, okay, I'm gonna take the next 5-10 minutes. I'm gonna feel whatever I'm gonna feel. I'm gonna take a step back and try to like categorize it or name it. And I think you talked about naming it in a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say, okay, what can I do differently, or what could I have done differently in this situation, or how can I just maybe sometimes you just need to breathe. Like, okay, I'm gonna breathe, right? But it's something, again, you have to do this sometimes it's every moment. You have to make that decision to do something different and try to be the best version of yourself in that moment.
Absolutely. No, wicked courage, some of our East Coast friends might say. So like I want to tell you congrats, but also and like steadfast, be peace be the journey, man, because like it is a lifetime of work. And
Yeah.
yeah, you definitely dove 2 feet into some of that mess, but it sounds like you're coming up and you're breathing for air and you're doing some good things. So that's what's up for sure.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is some of the narrative, some of the conversation that we could have around, well, we've always done it this way, or you've always been this type of person, or some of the comments you mentioned about out of character and stuff, particularly in our super inner circles, right? So like most recently I've seen some things and I know maybe you've posted some stuff about it too, but we're breaking this intergenerational
Yeah.
situation, man. Like
Yeah.
there's far too much that whether it's the way that we treat folks on the fringe of our mainstream culture or the way that we use names and language in a particularly direct way or what's the right word for it, intentional way,
Yeah.
the things that we do now that have become or are coming closer to the middle of the normal, that seemed going to therapy, for example, seemed just absolutely outrageous. Hush, hush, let's not talk about it. And still, there's
Yeah.
lots of stigma around all sorts of things. But as we sort of normalize it and as we accept these different parts and pieces of the human experience together, I think that that we're all better for it. But
Yep.
what have you noticed gets you the biggest resistance or the biggest rub in your process of change so far? Is it your behaviors? You mentioned a little bit about boundaries. Is it the way that you speak about the world or yourself or carry yourself? Like, what would you say that people are reacting most intensely towards?
Yeah. So I think so it depends, right? I think the folks that are closer to me are is more around very out of character. It's not like him. Um, and they still kind of think of me as what they knew in the past and how I approach things, or like, and to be fair, like I was this super grumpy, always calling myself old. My health was in horrible shape, right? I was getting super fat, and like this whole, like, they knew me the certain way, and I like internalized that, and like that's who I became. That was my persona to the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when now all of a sudden, I've been going to the gym for the last 8 months. I lost, a whole bunch of weight. Fitness and eating right is super important to me, and that, throws people off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, like, when one of the biggest reactions I get is like, "Oh, you lost weight? Are you sick?" It's like, "Oh, thanks. That's exactly what I'm going for." But no, I'm not sick.
Right.
Thanks
I'm
for
actually
sharing.
working on my health, to
Yeah,
be
exactly.
honest.
Yeah. And my response usually is like, I'm making better choices, right? Because that's just really what it came down to. I just making better choices. And then for the stuff that I post online, it's more about like, wow, I can't believe you're talking about that openly. And, I've heard comments around, like I said, somebody at work told me they thought I got hacked, or, comments around, well, what do you think that's going to do for like future employment and those kind of things? Employers look at your social media now, and I'm just like, if an employer is going to pass on me for being open and vulnerable, I don't want to work for them anyways,
Speak
right?
on it. Speak on
Yeah,
it.
like
Yes.
that's not a company I want to deal with, right?
Mm.
And so again, I just get different reactions depending on how close people are to me, and for the folks that don't know me as well and only know me a little bit through social media, but a lot more through some of the things I've been posting recently and the stuff that we're doing with Storm Champ. They're like, I'm starting to get like oh, that's pretty cool, or, oh, hey, this has really helped me. And like, that's the best ones we get is like,
Yeah.
I listened to the episode and I loved it. And it's like, thank God, like this is exactly what we're hoping for, right?
Yeah.
Is being able to impact people's lives that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so what would you say has been like one of your greatest, I don't know if victory is the right word for it, but with starting Storm Champ and being able to engage with folks around these important topics and issues, what have you learned about yourself in this journey?
Um, that's a great question. So what I've learned so far about the experience with Storm Champ, and I think it's important to understand kind of the genesis of Storm Champ for me, and kind of how that came to be. So there was a point where I started going to therapy. I started meditating, and I would say like, we need to do a whole conversation or like episode on meditation. But so meditation like completely changed my life, and so that I was doing. I found a book called "Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself" by a man. His name is Dr. Joe Dispenza. really, really good book. There is a guided meditation that's part of that book. And in fact, in that book is where he had a whole chapter about the person you project to the world being different than the person you are on the inside and how to bridge the gap between the two. And that was like the light bulb that went off for me. I was like, that's it. This is it. This is where the crisis all started. But anyways, at the back of the book, he's got a really long guided meditation. And the meditation takes you, it's like different phases. So like over like a 4-week period, like the first week, you're basically learning how to quiet your mind. And if you've ever done meditation, like the hardest part is quieting your mind. Like I couldn't go like a second without like something blaring in my head or me churning on something that I've been churning on for like the last month and a half or whatever. So, first week, quiet your mind. Second week is understand which emotions you want to get rid of. And you kind of tackle an emotion at a time. So at the time I wanted to get rid of guilt. Like a big thing was for me was guilt. So like you kind of, you spend a whole entire week meditating every day about guilt. And the third week is about letting go of that emotion. So now you've named the emotion, you dealt with it. Now you're going to let it go. So he walks you through letting it go. The fourth week is manifesting something for your future. And so if you can think of something you want really to happen in your future, and you can live in that emotion during the meditation, like so a lot of it's happiness and gratitude and all this other stuff, right? The idea is you project that energy out to the universe, and that event or something along those lines will be projected back to you. And I'll be honest, like I got to that fourth week, and the way I was feeling at the time, like I didn't feel ready for that. Like I didn't feel worthy to do that. I didn't feel like I was gonna I couldn't project the positive enough energy in the world to make that be a thing. And I ended up like waiting like a whole other 2 weeks before I ever jumped into that fourth phase, right? And finally, I finally woke up, and I remember the date. It was January 3rd, and I woke up that morning and I did that part of the meditation, and it was like something opened up, something clicked, and I felt it in the meditation. I was like, "There's something different." Like it's like the universe kind of was like, "Welcome home."
Yeah.
And I felt very different, like way better than I had in months. And then I went to the gym right after that, and I was on a treadmill, and all of a sudden, all these ideas started coming in my head. It's like, I have to share the story. I have to share the journey. I'm going to do it in a podcast, and I'm going to do a video. And like, there was like a whole gym session of like creativity just going through my head. And when I got done with it, I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, again, going back, I'm super introverted. I don't talk about this stuff. I don't put myself out there. All this, like, but something compelled me. Ended up writing out like what I felt in like my journal, right? Because I was journaling by that point. And so that was for me, that was the genesis of what ended up becoming Storm Champ. Because so 3 weeks after that, I ended up connecting again with Angie because we were working on her business. 2 weeks after that, we have a random conversation about like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this podcast. She's like, oh my God, like I'm talking to Derek and Kim, and we're talking about doing a podcast. Let's all get together. And so all that long ass story to say, like, what I've learned is like when you set a goal and you get people that are like-minded to help you get there, and you have the same mission and vision to it, you can make it happen. Now, granted, this is episode 7 of Storm Champ. We're just getting started, but it already feels like we're having impact on people's lives. And that's like the most important thing for me. So it's like, even in the darkness, even in your like worst times, you can manifest these beautiful things, and it can be something better than you can ever possibly imagine. And that's where I started to regain hope that I was going to get out of whatever I was going through.
Absolutely. And that'll be the blueprint for the next time you're in the mess and to get right back out of it again. Absolutely.
Exactly. Absolutely. And if I can share those little tidbits and tools, like that's what's worked for me, and that what helped me get on the path to get out of the darkness, right? It may not work for everybody else, but at a minimum, people are going to be like, okay, well, let me check out this meditation thing, or let me check out this book that he's talking about, or maybe, okay, it put me on a different path to go find this other kind of guided meditation that's actually going to help me, right? And that's the goal. It's like, this isn't a one fit, cure all for everybody, but it's like, let's give you these little nuggets, and then your path is going to take you where you need to be.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the one big takeaway for me, if I were to sort of project it out there for Storm Champ, is that our audience understands exactly that it's not one size fits all, and that there's no shame in understanding your experience and becoming an expert in that. So even when you don't know the right language for it and you don't know who this person is showing up in your life, and a
Right.
lot of times when you think about the darkness or the storm that you might be in, you're seeing yourself as someone who you're not, right? You're coming face
Right.
to face with the truth of the mess of your life or your situation in that moment. And you're saying, this isn't like me. I mean, that was me. I remember being such a like fun, and at the best of times, I'm laughing about everything. We're talking about things. I like to get serious and political too, sure, whatever. But like, I used to be this random act of kindness type of kid. I loved the sort of servant leadership stuff that kind of
Yep.
goes into being a part of granted I grew up in a small town, so maybe there's a little bit of that kind of bled into my personality, but like being behind the scenes, I don't need a lot of credit or a lot of shine about it, but the little everyday acts of kindness, free hugs, whatever, let me go ahead and give everybody a candy cane around Christmas time, whatever the situation is that I could do to show a little bit of love and positivity in the world. I loved doing that, and I took massive pride in that. And so when I got a little bit older, life started weighing me down in 400 billion different ways, and I started looking at myself and hearing myself and seeing myself as like this person who was just carrying around all this resentment and all of this anger, and I had eyes out for was the negative and what I could
Yeah.
call out and the pessimism in the world, and and how I could get loud and bold about calling people out on stuff like that. I was like, nothing about that energy is the little girl who loved random acts of kindness. Like, where did
Right.
that girl go? And so the reverse of that is absolutely true as well. As you're starting to dig yourself out and you're starting to breathe new life into the hope and the opportunity ahead of you, you're not going to recognize yourself at times. Who is this girl doing doing like all of this stuff in the gym? Like, I never once,
Right.
I was sort of a student athlete at one point, but then I'm fairly committed to my health, and I enjoy waking up early in the morning. Not quite on your meditation plan yet. I'm working on it still, but me and nature are one, man. And
Right.
I love that I give myself the chance. And I think the one thing I would say for our audience in Storm Champ is none of us are clinically experts in the matter
Oh
by
yeah.
any means, but what we know is our own true experience, and what we're confident in is that vulnerability and exposing the courage it takes to connect with other people, because you're not going to get through it alone, and there's only strength in numbers. And the fact of the matter is like, what you're going through, other people really understand, and they're scared, they're shamed, they're guilted into not talking about it.
Right.
So what
I
you're
think one of
doing, I was going to say, the other piece about it is what you're doing when you get the reactions from folks who are like, oh, that's a little unlike you, or that's a little outside your character, is you're making them question themselves in that
yeah.
same moment as well.
Yeah. And I think the really important thing, you're definitely you don't have to do it alone. But there's an important caveat to that, in my opinion, is
Mm-hmm.
no one's going to save you. You're going to save yourself, but it doesn't mean you can't get help, right? It doesn't mean that you can't find your tribe or your partners or whatever you want to call them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And surround yourself with those kind of people that will help build you up, will sit with you in the darkness
Mm-hmm.
because they've been there themselves or they're tuned in enough themselves and understand what you're going through. It's like, but the big thing with me right now is like, I'm okay with like sitting down with somebody and like literally sitting in the darkness with them and like, hey, yeah, I get it. Like I was there too. Like
Mm-hmm.
what can I do to help you get out? Right. As opposed to like the judgment of, oh yeah, you just need to get your shit together. Right. Like
Right.
you're too emotional and all this other stuff and get your shit together. Right. And I really like because that was a big thing with me. Like I always got categorized as too emotional. Like I'm the guy that cries in movies, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
challenge anybody to get through like season one of This Is Us and without crying, right? Like, but that was me. I was a blubbering mess every single episode because like I feel like I have this big heart and I'm okay with that. And but
Mm-hmm.
for the longest time, like I would feel shame around that because like, oh, you're too emotional, you this and this and that, and so it caused me to eat my feelings and not express myself and all these other things. And it's like, no, I realized like I'm not emotional, I'm passionate. Like I'm not emotional, I love, and I'm okay with loving big, right?
Right.
Like, been accused of being this hopeless romantic before, and it's like, why? Because I can see things other people can't, right? Because I can see a potential in this universe that like and put in the work to get there. And like that doesn't make me bad, but it would always trigger this shame of like, why I shouldn't care so much and I shouldn't, love so much and all this other stuff. It's like, no, fuck that. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's who I am. Like, and I'm done apologizing for that. I'm not going to apologize for that anymore. Right. And that's part of
Excellent.
bridging that gap of who you think you're supposed to be versus who you really are.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like this, Carlos. I'm glad that you're coming into your skin. That's great. I appreciate that courage it takes to do that, you know?
You know what's interesting with you, and so it's really interesting the relationship you and I have. So right, to be fair, like I didn't know you before January, right?
Right.
So you've only seen you were seeing me in the darkness, like the very beginning, like I was still dealing with a lot of shit,
Sure.
right? But and then so of course we were interacting, and we're building a relationship and a friendship, based on the podcast and everything we're sharing, right?
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see, like, at some point a year from now, 2 years from now, like kind of like what you think versus somebody who you knew from before, because it's
Yeah.
really going to be two different things. It's
Yeah.
literally two different people, and it's such a hard thing for people to get their head around. It's like I am not the same person, and I
Right.
know people that listen to this that I work with. It's like, oh, you seem like the same Carlos, because work was the one area where I always had my shit together. Work was the
Right.
one area that I always did really well at and I excelled at. It was
Hmm.
everything else that
So
was a complete fucking disaster,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but it's
absolutely.
just interesting to see the different dynamics of it. It's going to be cool to like look back on this conversation a year from now. It's like, oh yeah, we've all come a such a long way.
Absolutely. No, I'm so excited to be a witness and a testimony to that. And same goes to you on the flip side. So I
Absolutely.
know life is happening every single day, every single moment of it. And so I'm just excited that we're able to connect and we're able to share some of those pieces of what normally people don't really see or take time to invest in understanding the full story behind. So thanks for sharing tonight, Carlos. I really do appreciate it. I know folks will have lots to think about and lots of comments on what you've shared with us tonight. And we'll be able to link all of your social media, your personal blog, I know, and some of your Instagram stuff to the episode tonight. And everything will
Absolutely.
be on our Storm Champ page. So look forward to that in the coming days and weeks here. So
Yeah, definitely appreciate your time. Thanks for, and again, all the work that you do behind the scenes and all the interviewing that you do. I appreciate it all. And
yeah.
I know, like, in my heart of hearts, I know Storm Champ is going to be something really significant and impactful. And I can't wait to see where we go.
Yes, awesome. Well, go team always. And I hope to see everybody tuning into our episode. And for now, that is Storm Champ. Thanks, everyone.
So, yeah.